There was once a car company that thought like a fighter jet manufacturer. It didn't just build cars. It engineered machines for people who thought differently, for drivers who wanted to feel like pilots, not passengers. Born in the icy wind tunnels of Sweden's aerospace industry, Saab applied cockpit thinking to everyday driving. The ignition was placed between the seats for safety. The dashboard wrapped around the driver like a jet's control panel. And the engine came turbocharged before that was common anywhere else. Everything Saab did was different, intentionally. It was a company that refused to follow trends. Instead, it created its own logic, practicality merged with precision, eccentricity balanced with engineering. For decades, owning a Saab wasn't just a consumer decision. It was a personality trait, a quiet rebellion against the expected. But in a world moving toward uniformity, Saab's uniqueness became a liability. As global car companies consolidated and economies of scale became everything, Saab struggled to keep up. It was bought, restructured, shelved, and in the end, erased. This is the story of how a car company that dared to be different was ultimately crushed by a system that rewards conformity. How a brand inspired by jet fighters flew too high, and why sometimes being brilliantly built just isn't enough. In the aftermath of World War II, Sweden found itself in a unique position, politically neutral, industrially capable, and acutely aware of the need to defend itself in a rapidly dividing world. From this strategic caution was born a new company, Svenska Aeroplan Aktiebolaget, or SAAB. Its purpose was clear: design and build military aircraft that could patrol and protect the skies over Scandinavia. SAAB's first creations were sleek, efficient fighter jets, engineered with aerodynamic precision and built for reliability under extreme conditions. The company quickly became a cornerstone of Sweden's defense industry, developing innovations in aerodynamics, safety, and systems integration that rivaled larger global players. But war production alone was not enough to sustain the company in peacetime. SAAB needed a new direction, and it found one on the road. In the late 1940s. As Europe rebuilt itself and civilian life returned, the demand for personal transportation surged. Sweden, with its harsh winters and vast rural landscapes, was no exception. SAAB's engineers, already masters of airflow and structural integrity, proposed an idea that seemed both logical and radical: apply aircraft design principles to automobiles. In 1949, the first SAAB car was unveiled, the Saab 92. It looked nothing like the other cars on European roads. Rounded, narrow, almost organic in shape, the car was designed to be aerodynamic, just like a plane. The engineers used monocoque construction, a method borrowed directly from aircraft design, to make the body lightweight yet strong. Its two-stroke engine was simple and efficient, perfect for Sweden's long winters and sparse fuel stations. Early SAABs were strange, even awkward to many drivers. But they were also safe, solid, and remarkably good at navigating ice-covered roads. More importantly, they reflected something rare in automotive design: integrity. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was for show. As the 1950s gave way to the 60s, SAAB continued to grow, slowly, deliberately, and always in its own way. It refused to imitate German luxury or American flash. Instead, it focused on functional design, engineering creativity, and safety innovation. Its engineers weren't from the car industry. They were aircraft designers, and they approached the road the way they approached the sky, with discipline, calculation, and a deep respect for physics. By the time Saab introduced the 96, followed by the now iconic 99, it had established itself as something unique in the automotive world, a brand that didn't just sell cars, but an idea. The idea that a vehicle could be different, safer, smarter, more purposeful, even if it didn't look like anything else on the road. Owning a Saab was never just about transportation. It was a declaration of individuality, of nonconformity, of trust in engineering over image. From the beginning, Saab attracted a different kind of driver: architects, engineers, doctors, writers, people who didn't care about status symbols, but who valued thoughtfulness, safety, and function. The loyalty that formed around the brand bordered on obsession. Saab drivers didn't just like their cars, they believed in them. They talked about them like trusted companions, praised their stability in blizzards, their firm grip on icy roads, the satisfying whine of the turbocharger as it spooled up in a cold Scandinavian morning. These weren't drivers looking to impress. They were looking to connect with a machine that felt like it understood them. Part of what made Saabs feel different was that they were, quite literally, engineered differently. The ignition was placed on the floor, between the seats, not for novelty, but for safety. In a crash, a traditional steering column-mounted ignition could shatter a driver's knee. Saab's engineers, trained in aviation, where every design choice had a survival reason, changed the placement. The dashboard was designed like an aircraft cockpit, driver-focused, clear, with controls grouped logically by function. Even the shape of the windshield was a result of aircraft-grade visibility thinking. Saab's night panel feature, introduced in the 1990s, allowed drivers to dim the entire instrument cluster except for the speedometer, reducing distractions and eye strain, a concept borrowed straight from fighter jet cockpits. But above all, what made Saab special was its insistence on safety long before safety became a marketing term. The company performed crash tests when other manufacturers considered them unnecessary. Saab invented side impact protection systems. It was the first to offer headlamp washers as standard, a small feature, but one that made a difference in dark Nordic winters. Then there was the turbo. Saab didn't invent turbocharging, but it refined it, civilized it, and made it reliable enough for everyday use. In the 1970s, when most turbocharged engines were known for brutal lag and sudden surges of power, Saab introduced the 99 Turbo, a car that delivered performance with predictability. It changed the perception of what a practical car could do. The result was a brand that didn't need to shout. It whispered, and people listened. Saab owners formed communities, clubs, even annual festivals. They spoke a language outsiders didn't understand. To own a Saab was to belong to something, to choose the road less traveled not for vanity, but for principle. Yet the very things that made Saab different, its strange design, its uncompromising safety features, its refusal to chase mainstream trends, also made it vulnerable. As the automotive world moved toward cost-cutting and homogenization, Saab's eccentricities were increasingly seen not as virtues, but liabilities. Still, for a long time, the cult endured. Because those who drove Saabs didn't want more, they wanted better. And they believed they had found it. In 1989, General Motors acquired 50% of Saab's automobile division. A decade later, it bought the rest. On paper, it was a strategic alliance. Saab would gain access to global resources, broader distribution, and modernized manufacturing. GM would inherit a small but fiercely loyal customer base, along with a brand known for engineering integrity, but it was never a comfortable fit. Saab's roots were in independent thinking, in resisting standardization, and doing things for reasons that weren't always financial. GM's roots were in economies of scale, platform sharing, and maximizing returns. One company prioritized identity. The other prioritized efficiency. The early signs of tension were subtle. Models that once carried bespoke Saab architecture began to share platforms with GM's global lineup. Underneath the sheet metal, SAABs were no longer entirely SAAB, the 9 to 3 and 9 to 5, while still visually unique, began to inherit parts from Opel, Chevrolet, even Subaru. For long-time SAAB enthusiasts, the change was more than technical. It was philosophical. A company that once designed its own engines, transmissions, and safety systems was now rebranding shared components. Inside the company, engineers pushed back. They argued for continued innovation, for maintaining the systems and design language that had built their customer base. But GM's executives, focused on numbers, often overruled them. Unique parts were expensive. Shared parts were efficient. It was, from their perspective, just good business. Slowly, the soul of SAAB, the uncompromising, slightly odd, deeply principled soul, began to fade. Externally, the cars still looked familiar. But something had changed. They felt less distinct, less precise, less necessary. And as quality control suffered, reliability issues emerged. Consumer confidence wavered. Then came the financial crisis of 2008. GM itself was struggling, posting massive losses and heading toward bankruptcy. In the scramble to survive, GM made a brutal decision to shed brands. SAAB, never a major profit center, was deemed expendable. For SAAB's employees in Trolthtan, it was more than a business decision. It was a betrayal. Generations of designers, engineers, and factory workers had built something they believed in. Now it was being sold off, like inventory. Efforts were made to save the brand. Negotiations began with several interested buyers. But under GM's watch, the damage had already been done. The name still carried meaning, but the substance behind it had been diluted. What had once been a proudly niche automaker, defined by innovation, aviation roots, and safety-first design, had become a brand struggling to define itself within a system that never truly understood it. The GM era did not kill SAAB outright, but it set in motion the compromises that made its fall inevitable. By 2009, SAAB was on life support. General Motors, itself in bankruptcy, had officially announced that the brand was for sale or would be shut down. For the small town of Trolthtan, where generations had worked in SAAB's factory, it was a moment of collective anxiety. Thousands of jobs, decades of identity, and a national symbol were at risk. Several buyers emerged, each offering a different vision for SAAB's future. From Dutch boutique sports car maker Spyker to Chinese manufacturers eager to acquire European engineering, negotiations were intense, complex, and under urgent pressure. For a brief moment, it seemed like a rescue was possible. In 2010, Spyker officially acquired SAAB from GM, promising a rebirth, leaner, smaller, but independent once more. Hope returned to Trolthtan. Engineers resumed work, production lines restarted, and SAAB began development on new models. But the damage from years of underinvestment, brand dilution, and broken consumer trust was deeper than it appeared. Cash flow was weak. Supply chains were fragile. And above all, SAAB was running out of time. To survive, Spyker sought outside investment. The most promising option came from China. Companies like Young Men and Pangdao showed interest in investing or outright acquiring SAAB's assets and production rights. For SAAB, this was a lifeline. For GM, it was a problem. Despite having sold SAAB, GM still held critical technology licenses, especially for the 9 to 5 and 9 to 3 platforms, which contained proprietary systems used in GM's other global models. A full sale to Chinese entities risked exposing sensitive designs and software in one of the most competitive and politically sensitive sectors in the world. automotive technology. Behind closed doors, GM's legal teams and government liaisons drew a hard line. The sale to China would be blocked. National security, they argued, was at stake. Allowing Chinese automakers access to GM-based architectures could give rivals a strategic advantage. With negotiations stalled, investors withdrawn, and debts piling up, Saab found itself with no way forward. In December 2011, the company officially filed for bankruptcy. The assembly lines stopped. The lights dimmed. Tan fell silent. What had started as an ambitious post-war aerospace venture had ended in a geopolitical standoff between a struggling Swedish company, an American corporate giant, and rising Chinese industrial power. Saab was no longer just a car brand. It had become collateral in a global game of ownership, access, and control for its employees, fans, and the country that had once taken pride in its innovation. The fall of Saab felt both inevitable and avoidable. A victim of circumstance, yes, but also of mismanagement, mistiming, and a world where idealism was no longer enough. When Saab filed for bankruptcy in 2011, many believed the story had reached its end. The factory gates in Trollhättan closed, the assembly lines fell silent, and the lights went out on one of the most original car companies in automotive history. But not for everyone. To those who drove them, designed them, and believed in them, Saab was never just a manufacturer. It was a way of thinking, a commitment to logic, safety, and individuality in an industry that increasingly demanded compromise. And even as the company disappeared, its philosophy remained. Around the world, the Saab community didn't just survive, it adapted. Online forums stayed alive. Mechanics who understood Saab's quirks became essential lifelines. Spare parts circulated through informal networks. And every year, in places as distant as Sweden, the UK, and the United States, Saab owners gathered not to mourn, but to celebrate. They celebrated turbochargers that spooled up with a whistle, night panels that dimmed the dashboard like a cockpit, wipers that swept headlights in dark Nordic winters, and ignition keys placed not on the steering column, but between the seats where they belonged. These weren't design gimmicks. They were engineering decisions made by people who thought about human safety and experience before marketing. And for those who understood that, Saab wasn't just a car. It was a companion. After the bankruptcy, a Chinese-Swedish company, NAVS acquired Saab's assets. Their goal, to build electric vehicles based on the Saab 9-3 platform. But GM, still holding technology licenses, blocked use of key systems. Legal barriers mounted. A few prototypes were built, but the Saab name could not be used. The brand was, effectively, locked in history. Yet something remained. Former Saab engineers brought their values to new companies. Young designers studied the brand as a case study in integrity. And Saab's story became a quiet reminder that not all failures are created equal. The world didn't stop because Saab ceased to exist. But it lost something rare. A company that was willing to build strange, stubborn, brilliant machines in defiance of the mainstream. A brand that didn't just sell transportation, but belief. Today, Saab is gone, but not forgotten. It survives in icy parking lots, where 900 turbos still start without complaint. In highway lanes, where 9-to-5 wagons quietly overtake louder, newer cars. And in the people who still whisper to strangers at gas stations, this was made by an aircraft company. You know, Saab flew too high. Yes, but it also flew with purpose. And in doing so, it left behind something no bankruptcy could erase. A legacy. If this story moved you, you're not alone. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you driven a Saab? Dreamed of owning one? Or maybe you just discovered this strange, beautiful brand for the first time. If you enjoy deep dives into innovation, failure, and forgotten brilliance, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep these stories alive. And it tells the algorithm what you already know. Some machines are more than just metal. They're stories worth telling.